We invite you to worship with Tabernacle Baptist Church. 5 services, multiple locations. Tabernacle, Maine, 1223 Laney Walker Boulevard, Augusta, Georgia, 7:15 a.m., 9:45 a.m., and 12:15 p.m. And Tabernacle West, 702 North Bel Air Road, Evans, Georgia, 9 a.m. and 11:15 a.m. The virus of fear, worry, discouragement, loneliness, and despair has overtaken our lives. We're in a spiritual health crisis. In times like these, it's easy to give up. It's easy to allow the troubles of today to disrupt the hope of tomorrow. We're trying to figure out, will life ever be the same? We're faced with the reality that we have been infected. The question for us is this: when we're fighting for our lives, what do we need? We need help. We need healing. We need a cure. Isn't that what we're looking for?
Where it's all about God's people. TBC, making an impact. Where it's all about God's people. TBC, making an impact. Welcome to the Kingdom Living Broadcast with the Reverend Dr. Charles E. Goodman. Making an impact.
Well, listen, I did read it, and I know that today's diagnosis is going to come as a way of honesty. Out of the other ones, I think most people can admit that fear is a real issue. And yes, worry and discouragement and despair. But as I checked your test results, it's going to be a little odd for you. And I need you to really take what I'm saying. I need you to digest this, because most people do not want to admit what has shown up on your test. I want to let you know that your test results today says that you have been infected with the virus of loneliness. Listen, here's what's wild when you think about it. Even before COVID-19 or coronavirus came, more than 1 in 5 adults in the U.S. said they felt lonely or isolated. I need to help you, because for many of us, we may be in a house with people, and we may be now still trying to navigate a reopening world. But if the truth be told, most of us feel lonely. We're isolated. Research shows that the chronic loneliness has negative effects even on our physical health. That's why I'm glad you're here, because I really need to talk to you to let you know that you're not by yourself. And I know that it's daunting, and I know most people will not admit to it, but all of us, me included, feel lonely. What is it? Because if you think about it, all of us need meaningful connections with people we care about, who care about us. The question is raised, how do we do that? Even in the culture that we have now, I know part of us has struggled over the last few weeks in quarantine or sheltering home, as we've been told, hey, we need to make sure that we care for others. And yes, we're doing our part, but part of our caring with others means that we cannot see people that we love or that we're used to seeing. Matter of fact, I read an article where this lady said one of the things she hears most is, when can I see my grandparents or see my grandkids? At the end of the day, for many of us, we perhaps are struggling with that. There are people we have not even seen since the quarantine has started. And I know, if the truth be told, we took their presence for granted in our lives, and now here we are wondering, it's not enough just to talk to them on the phone, but I really want to see them in person. And I know that we've been told by health experts that we have to protect the elderly population, but I will admit to you that it gets tough and it gets hard, because disconnect leads to this feeling of isolation and loneliness. I mean, let's be honest. How does this happen? Not just with our elderly population, but many of us are wrestling with those moments. And it's amazing. You can be in a house full of people and still feel alone. You can be around people and still feel isolated. 6 feet apart can feel like a world apart if we're not careful. And I know you're wondering, man, this is a crazy diagnosis. I feel good, PG. Well, really, do you? You're saying you got it. Well, you don't know, PG. I got Facebook, I got Instagram, but that's not true connection. I mean, it looks good, and I know you get comments and likes, and I know you send messages, but you still feel lonely. Matter of fact, even during this time, we really struggle with loneliness or isolation. Maybe there are some reasons that you can perhaps say is evident in your life. Loneliness or isolation can come maybe because you lost a loved one or friend through death or relocation. Or maybe lack of close family ties. You know, one of these things has exposed is that many of our families are not as close as we say they are. Or perhaps even living alone can create this notion of loneliness. Many times, if we'll be honest, difficulties in meeting new people is a problem if you have introverted personalities. Or maybe a feeling of loss or grief could be feeding into your loneliness. Or it could even be poor physical health, frailty, mobility issues. You can't get around, and because of that, you're now feeling lonely. Or even depression, anxiety. Or maybe even the fear of rejection. Most of us struggle meeting new people because we don't want to be rejected. Or maybe it's our inability to participate in activities due to lack of access to certain things. Maybe it's illness, or maybe it's even transportation. Or yes, maybe you're the one who has said you got to stay in because you may have some issues that this virus can expose. But there are some even deeper reasons for loneliness. It could even be a lack of purpose or meaning in life. It could be language or cultural barriers. Many of you who are perhaps watching us all over the globe, you're in a new space with new people, and there you are, and it's happened, and now you feel so isolated. Well, maybe you just have a hard time fitting in. And if we be honest about it, that's why I want to really challenge you today. And I know that for the rest of them, we perhaps don't put this virus up as meaningful as fear, worry, discouragement, and despair. But I want you to be careful, because if you do not get your loneliness checked, it could be detrimental to your health. And I'm not just saying your physical health, but I'm talking about your mental health. Because if the truth be told, I don't know about you, but I can attest, everyone feels lonely from time to time. Whether you're extroverted, whether you think you are a people's person, all of us have some periods we are just in a place of isolation. And isolation, if we're not careful, has a negative impact on our physical, mental, and social health. Matter of fact, I did some research because I wanted to make sure that you get some real good information about what this looks like. There are physical symptoms to loneliness. You can have aches and pains, headaches, illness, or worsening of medical conditions. Yes, loneliness can jack you up physically. There are also mental health conditions, increased risk of depression, anxiety, paranoia, or yes, even panic attacks. Here's another thing, low energy, tiredness, or lack of motivation. Here's another symptom of loneliness, sleep problems, difficulty getting to sleep, or waking frequently or sleeping too much when your sleep is off could mean that you're wrestling or dealing with loneliness. Or even diet problems. I wonder how many of us are coming out of this quarantine with the quarantine 25. Or it could be a loss of appetite, or sudden weight gain, loneliness. If the truth be told, most of us, I know you don't want to admit it, are emotional eaters. And when we're alone, we have nothing else to do but food to keep us company. Or if the truth be told, there's going to be a high rise of substance abuse, increased consumption of alcohol and smoking, medication, and yes, even drugs. But one of the worst symptoms is negative feelings. Loneliness has a way of making us feel worthless, hopeless, and perhaps even as we dealt with the whole virus of despair, can lead to thoughts of suicide. So here's the reality. That's why I brought you in, because I know this may come as a shock, but I want you to know that you have to learn how to identify in order to fight loneliness. Whether a person lives in isolation or not, feeling a lack of social connectedness can be painful. This has been a struggle for many of us. Loneliness can be described in so many different ways. And I don't know where you are, but perhaps you're now in that place, that dungeon of despair because of loneliness, because of a lack of companionship. You feel left out. Everybody else is Zooming, but nobody wants to give you the password. You feel in tune or out of tune with people around you. There you are struggling. And at the end of the day, I want you to know that even during this time, it's not just easy to call up a friend. Loneliness is not one of those things you can say, well, I'll just get a new friend this week and I'll get through loneliness. If the truth be told, true companionship and connection is difficult. And what happens if you choose wrong? What happens if you connect with the wrong individual? It has the potential to even be worse. The truth be told, many of us are lonely. We're wrestling. We're in isolation. We got this whole thought that nobody knows what we're going through. And here it is, if we're not careful, we'll mismanage loneliness. And listen, I need you to understand that if we're not in the good space where we need to be, our loneliness could make us miss out on our true value of who we are. Listen, I want you to know something. Even though you're experiencing loneliness, even though isolation and quarantine and shelter in house has caused some stress mentally and physically, and yes, even socially, this is what I need you to know. Is whenever you feel unloved, unimportant, or insecure, remember to whom you belong. I got this one word. And I want you to know the cure for loneliness is not getting more friends on social media. The cure for loneliness is not having someone call you every single day. The cure for loneliness is not drowning yourself in alcohol, and it's not consuming large quantities of food. But I've come to let you know that the cure for loneliness and isolation, guess what? According to what I have here, is the presence of God. This is what I want to help you, because even when you feel alone, you're not alone. Even when you feel in isolation and nobody gets you, the thing I want you to know is that you're never out of the space, out of the reach of God. This is the cure that's going to help us in our time of loneliness, is that even when I feel like I'm by myself, I got to know that God is still there. You never go where God is not. Envision, while we're even given this diagnosis, where you be. You can be in your home, and guess what? God is there. You can meander out in the store. Guess what? God is there. You can handle and go out in life. It doesn't matter. Listen, this is the crazy thing. Even though the world shut down, it did not stop God from still being where he needs to be. Matter of fact, Acts chapter 17:27 said he is not far from each of us. I love that. Each of us. Think of it. God doesn't play favorites. He doesn't just be close to me and close to those that perform on a stage. He's close to every last one of us. Don't matter your demographic, does not matter your skin color. Matter of fact, from the masses on city streets to isolated villages, in valleys and jungles, all people of every place can enjoy God's presence. But the problem is many don't. They plow through life as if there's no God to love them, as if their strength is their own, as if it's up to them to see their way through. And here is why I needed to make sure you know that this cure is available, is because my chief aim is that you do not live a godless life. The psalmist determined this way. I love reading the word of God that tells me when I'm afraid, I will trust in you, God. In other words, put your hope in God and you will get through this. Just think about the expansiveness of God. God surrounds us like the Pacific surrounds an islands. The question is, are you going to receive the presence of God? Here's the thing. As I've been giving you cures over the last few weeks, I've come to understand you have every right to receive it or reject it. And the question is, are you going to be a rock or a sponge to the presence of God? A rock resists it, but a sponge receives it. Are you going to harden your heart in order to say, God, I feel your presence even in this season? Or are you going to soften it and say, God, I'm grateful that your presence is here? Here's the thing that I've learned that has personally helped me navigate this season of isolation and loneliness, is that I've had to learn and get to the place where I open every pore of my soul to God's presence. This is what you need to do. And you're asking that question, PG, I hear you, I feel you, but how do I do this? Well, first you got to lay claim to the nearness of God. Hebrews 13:5 says, never will I leave you, and never will I forsake you. What's going to make this cure palatable in your life is you got to receive it. You got to believe that even when I can't see God, I still feel God. And even when I can't trace God, I can still trust God. You got to sometimes reemphasize this. The cure I'm giving you today is not just like the other cures I gave you of faith and peace and hope and joy, but what I did want you to know about the presence of God is that it's always there. It's not something that you got to inject every single day. It's just something you got to realize is still there. At the end of the day, one of the things that God always wants us to know is that we're not alone. Maybe that was a promise that God gave to Adam in the Garden of Eden when he walked with him. That same promise, that same reality is due for us today. There's a passage that helps me because I too, out of all the ones that we've been talking about, all the test results that have come back, I will admit to you this perhaps is one of the hardest ones because I know personally what it feels to be lonely, to be in isolation. And there's one passage of scripture that helps me. Psalm 139. I want to read this to you. If you get a chance, you need to jot this down. I hope that you've been taking copious notes. I hope you haven't just been showing up to this exam room and just been trying to hear it, but some stuff you need to write in a journal because there's some stuff that reminds us maybe this ought to be the thing that you listen to and read and ingest every single day. Listen to what the psalmist says in Psalm 139. He says this when he talks about the presence of God and how significant it is in our lives. Listen to what he says. Oh Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know my sitting down and my rising up. You understand my thoughts are far off. You comprehend my path and my lying down. You are acquainted with all my ways, for there is not a word on my tongue. But behold, O Lord, you know it all together. You've hedged it behind me, and before you laid your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high, I cannot attain it. Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend into heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall still lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. I love this because literally what the psalmist is saying and what's so powerful about this cure is that there is no place, no season, no situation that I can escape the presence of God. Think about what he said in Psalm 139. David asked the pivotal question, where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? At the end of the day, what he's saying is what I need all of us to understand. That closed doors don't stop the presence of God. Furloughs don't stop the presence of God. Sickness and loss of loved ones does not stop the presence of God. That the presence of God is the cure for our loneliness. But what does it do? That's why I love you coming in. You always ask some poignant questions. It always stretches me as your spiritual doctor to be able to look at, because I know you're asking, that sounds so good, PG, but please tell me, why then is the presence of God? What else does it do in my life? Well, let me give you these things. I've been reading closely, and I wanted to make sure you knew exactly the medication that I'm prescribing to you. And I wanted to make sure that you understood why the presence of God is so important. Well, number one, the presence of God encourages us. When you think about it, in our lonely moments, I don't know about you, it's good to know that I have someone that's encouraging me, someone that is cheering me on. When you feel like no one cares, God cares. And God gives us complete access. One thing I've learned is that when other people do not pick up the phone, when your Wi-Fi goes haywire and you have no connection with any of your devices, guess what? God's connection never fails. Maybe that's what he meant in Hebrews 4:16 when he said, so let us come boldly to the throne of our gracious God, and there we will receive his mercy. We will find grace to help us when we need it most. Don't you know that God always offers us the invitation of intimacy? Here's the crazy thing, that even me and you, with our jacked up selves, God still wants relationship. God still wants to be close to us. God still wants to be where we are. That's what Jesus meant in Revelations 3:20 when he made the declaration, I'm standing at the door and knocking. If anyone hears my voice, opens the door, I will come in and eat with them, and they will eat with me. I wonder, maybe the thing that's keeping you up is the knock on the door of your heart. Maybe it's been God trying to tell you the whole time, I'm right here with you. Maybe that's why we understand that in moments of loneliness can make us feel weak. Come on, let's be real. How many of us have been just feeling weak, fatigued, tired? Seem like we can't get no strength from nowhere, but here's why it's important you know that the presence of God is there, because when you are weak is when God shows you true strength. That's what Philippians 4:13 says, I have the strength to face all conditions by the power that Christ gives me. Which means that no matter what I'm facing, no matter what's happening, it's Christ that strengthens me. It was May 24th, 1965, and there was this boat that went out. It was a boat called, guess this, the Tinkerbell. It was piloted by a man by the name of Robert Manry. He was the copy editor for the Cleveland Plain Dealer, who felt that 10 years at the desk was enough boredom for a while. So he took a leave of absence, and this is what he wanted to do, fulfill his secret dream, and that was to sail the complete ocean. He wanted to go out, and the only individual he told was his wife, Virginia. But you can imagine that this 13.5-foot boat navigating the expansiveness of the sea and ocean was going to get lonely. Matter of fact, he said those weeks began to wear on him. There were moments that he was tossed overboard. There were moments he thought that he was going to get overrun by larger boats. Things were going through, but yet week after week he kept pressing. Those nights, the only thing that kept him through was wondering, man, did I make the right decision? He began talking to himself. He didn't think anybody would think anything of him, only to be in for a surprise. To his amazement, 300 vessels, as he was coming to the conclusion of his journey, helped to escort him all the way in. Horns blasting, 40,000 people stood on the banks, and they were cheering him on. But the only thing he could set his eyes on after those times of wandering and loneliness was his chief encourager, his wife, Virginia. She stood there on the shore, and she kept clapping and kept encouraging him. And he said that was the thing that helped press him through those lonely moments. And I want to let you know that just like Virginia is there for her husband, the same way Jesus is there for us. When we find ourselves tossed and driven based upon the sea of loneliness and isolation, Jesus is there to remind us, just keep pressing on. The presence of God encourages us. But there's something else I see also. The presence of God enriches us. It gives us sustenance. It gives us what we need. Psalm 16:11 says, you will show me the path that leads to life. Your presence fills me with joy and brings me pleasure forevermore. In other words, what I want to let you know, the good thing about the presence of God is that it has everything you need. It's in the presence of God that every other cure is manifested. If you need faith, it's in the presence of God. If you need joy, it's in the presence of God. Matter of fact, it's a pharmacy that never goes closed. It's 24/7, 365 days. The presence of God gives us whatever we need. Maybe that's what the apostles understood when they said in Acts chapter 3, verse 20, then times of refreshment will come from the presence of the Lord, and we'll again sing you Jesus, your appointed Messiah. You know, there's times that God gives us what we need just by giving us Him. There's an interesting story in Scripture about a man by the name of Moses. His story has always intrigued me. And what's so crazy is Moses was a man of duality. He was raised in privilege in Egypt, but he found himself on the run because of a mistake. And he found himself shepherding sheep on the backside of a mountain in Midian. And guess what happened? He runs into a bush that was burning but was not consumed. Conversation ensues, and guess what? Moses begins to talk to this bush. Comes to find out the bush is the presence of God. God has an assignment for Moses, and if you know anything about the story of Moses, Moses had a lot of insecurities. He stuttered, he stammered, and he also knew he had warrants, so going back to Egypt in his mind was a no-no. But the presence of God spoke to him in that bush and gave him something to enrich him. Because when Moses asked the critical question, what's going to give me all the power I need to stand in front of these people? What's going to allow me to make it with all my deficiencies and insecurities? And this is what God told him to say. When they ask who sent you, say, I am that I am. Give them my name. Short phrase, I am. Have you ever wondered how significant that name of God is for our lives? God's name enriches us. I am. Matter of fact, I want you to put that in practice right now wherever you are, because you're wondering, how then am I certain about that? Well, just understand the name of God, the I amness of God answers every question we have. Who's going to pay these bills? I am. Who's going to bring us through this situation? I am. Who's going to put food on the table? I am. Who's going to be with me when times get rough? I am. The presence of God, the I amness of God enriches us. But not only does it provide encouragement, not only does the presence of God provide us enrichment, but also the presence of God envelops us. It covers us. It surrounds us. It wraps us up. It's interesting because it lets us know that there is no place where we can go where the presence of God cannot find us. That was the significance of Psalm 139. But I want you to embrace that thought. Because I know for many of us, we assume that I can get out of the reach of God, and that is impossible. None of us can get out of the reach of God. God's presence is with us wherever we are. Exodus 33 says, the Lord replied, I will personally go with you, Moses, and I will give you rest. Everything will be fine for you. What I appreciate about that is that God reminds us that God doesn't have to send an angel.
Thank you for joining us. If you were blessed by today's message, there are several ways to view it again for free and play it back anytime and anywhere. Visit our YouTube channel, TBC Augusta GA, and our website, tbcaugusta.org. You can also download the Tab Impact app from the Apple Store or Google Play. As always, thank you for worshiping with us at the most impactful place on the planet, the historic Tabernacle Baptist Church.